The stone beneath your feet is black and smooth as obsidian. Can you feel it? Cold, unyielding, older than memory. A wind rises from nowhere, carrying no scent, no warmth, only the whisper of 1,000 voices who walked this path before you. Do you hear them? They're calling your name. Somewhere far ahead, through layers of frozen rivers and mountains that bleed shadows, a pale figure waits, patient, eternal, smiling with teeth like polished bone. The candles flicker. One by one, they go out. Welcome to Mr. Sleepless channel, and I'm Owlman. Tonight we drift into the deep mist of an older world in the 7-part series, The Origin of Fear. You're standing at the threshold now, friend. 9 levels stretch below you like the rungs of a ladder descending into silence. Wind cuts through you like obsidian blades. Fire licks at your heels, yet leaves no burn, only memory. And at the bottom, she waits. Mictecacihuatl, Lady of the Dead, her crown woven from flowers that bloom only in darkness. She knows you. She's always known you. From the dust of gods, you were born. To the dust of gods, you return. The living dance above with flames and marigolds. But down here, the dead are patient. They have all the time that ever was. You'd probably want to turn back, if the path behind you hadn't already dissolved into smoke. So before you dive into this story, take a second to hit that like and subscribe button. But only if this really ignites a fire in you for the legendary events I tell. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I want to know who's still awake with me tonight. Now, dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're dead. Not mostly dead. Not clinically dead for 90 seconds before the paddles brought you back. Dead. Your heart has stopped. Your breath has left. And now, standing at the edge of something vast and impossibly dark, you realize the Aztecs were right. Death isn't an ending. It's a commute. A very, very long commute. Welcome to Mictlan, the Aztec Underworld, where your soul is about to embark on a 4-year journey through 9 increasingly unpleasant levels just to earn the right to rest. No shortcuts. No frequent flyer miles. Just you, your spirit, and a road that makes Dante's Inferno look like a theme park. The air shifts. You feel it before you see it. A cold wind rising from nowhere, carrying the scent of dried earth and something older, something that predates memory itself. This is Mictlantecuhtli, the first level, and it's already testing you. Before you stretches a river, wide and black as obsidian, its surface rippling with currents you can't quite see. The Aztecs called it Apanohuaya, the place where one crosses the water. Sounds simple enough, right? Except you can't swim it. You can't wade it. You can't even touch it without dissolving like salt in the ocean. Your only hope? A small, hairless dog, a Mictlantecuhtli, waiting on the shore, watching you with eyes that seem far too intelligent for a canine. This is why the Aztecs buried dogs with their dead, not as pets, as guides. The dog recognizes your soul, sniffs the air, and if you were kind to animals in life, it plunges into the water and lets you cling to its back. If you weren't, well, let's just say the river has a long memory, and so do dogs. You make it across? Barely. Your fingers ache from gripping wet fur, and the cold has settled into your bones, which is strange because you're fairly certain you don't have bones anymore. Welcome to Level 2. Mictecacihuatl Mictlan, the place where the mountains crash together. And yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. Two enormous peaks rise before you, jagged and black, grinding against each other with the sound of 1,000 thunderstorms compacted into stone. They slam shut. They pull apart. They slam shut again. The rhythm is hypnotic, almost musical, except for the part where getting caught between them would crush your soul into cosmic dust. Scholars debate whether this level symbolizes the violent tectonic activity of Mesoamerica. Earthquakes were common, after all. Or whether it's a metaphor for the duality that obsessed Aztec cosmology, life and death, creation and destruction, the endless cycle of collapse and rebirth. Either way, you have to time it perfectly. Wait for the gap. Run. Don't look back. And for the love of Quetzalcoatl, don't trip. You stumble through just as the mountains roar shut behind you and immediately wish you'd stayed crushed. Level 3 is Iztapetl, the obsidian mountain, and it's exactly as friendly as it sounds. Imagine a slope made entirely of volcanic glass, razor sharp, impossibly steep, glittering black in the dim, sourceless light of the underworld. You have to climb it. No ropes, no handholds, just your soul's bare essence scraping against edges so fine they could split atoms. Every movement draws pain, a strange phantom agony that shouldn't exist because you're dead. But here it is, insistent and real. The Aztecs understood something modern science is only beginning to grasp. Consciousness doesn't end when the body does. Pain, memory, identity, they linger, they echo. And Mictlan is where those echoes go to be tested, refined, stripped down to their essential truth. By the time you reach the top of the obsidian mountain, bleeding light instead of blood, you're starting to understand. This isn't punishment. The Aztecs didn't believe in hell the way Europeans did. No eternal damnation for sinners, no lakes of fire for the wicked. Mictlan isn't about morality, it's about transformation. Every level peels away another layer of who you were, preparing you for who you'll become. Nothing. Pure, peaceful, absolute nothing. But first, you've got 6 more levels to go and the wind is picking up again. You feel it now. Tehuacayan, the 4th level, the place of freezing winds. It howls around you, sharp as broken glass, cold enough to shatter thought itself. This wind doesn't just chill, it erases. Memories start to flicker and fade like candle flames in a storm. Your name, your face, the people you loved, all of it whipping away into the dark. You stagger forward, half blind, half forgotten, and somewhere in the distance you hear laughter. Not cruel, not mocking, just knowing. Mictecacihuatl is waiting at the end of this road, the Lady of the Dead, and she's been watching you since the moment your heart stopped. She's patient. She has all the time that ever was. And you've only just begun to disappear. The wind finally stops, and for a moment, just one blessed, impossible moment, there's silence. You almost weep with relief. Then you realize the silence isn't empty. It's waiting. You've arrived at Panicatecoyan, the 5th level, the place where banners wave. Except there are no banners. No flags snapping in phantom breezes. No colorful pennants marking safe passage. Just an endless plain of nothing, and the creeping understanding that the name itself might be a joke. Some scholars think banners refers to the way souls flutter and drift here, weightless as cloth, caught between existence and oblivion. Others argue it's metaphorical, Banners as symbols of identity, and this is where your identity finally starts to unravel for good. You float, you drift, and with every passing moment, you remember less of why you ever thought being you mattered in the first place. But Mictlan isn't done with you yet, not even close. The ground beneath you shifts, or maybe it was never ground at all, and suddenly you're standing at the edge of the 6th level, Temiminalawayan, the place where arrows pierce you. And before you can process that deeply unwelcome phrase, the air fills with them. Obsidian-tipped arrows, thousands of them, raining down from a sky that shouldn't exist. They whistle as they fall, a sound like wind through broken teeth. And when they strike, and oh, they do strike, the pain is unlike anything the previous levels offered. It's sharp, immediate, personal. Each arrow finds a different wound: regret, guilt, shame, the small cruelties you pretended not to remember. The Aztecs weren't big on the concept of sin, but they understood imbalance. If you lived recklessly, took without giving, disrupted the cosmic order, Temiminalawayan is where you pay that tab. Not as punishment. Again, this isn't Christian hell, but as recalibration. The universe keeping its books balanced. You might be wondering, did the Aztecs really believe this? Like really believe that dead souls got pelted with supernatural arrows? The answer is complicated. Spanish chroniclers like Bernardino de Sahagún documented these beliefs in excruciating detail during the 16th century, transcribing interviews with Aztec elders who described Mictlan's 9 levels as literal truth. But here's the quirky bit. Some modern researchers suggest the arrows might have been a metaphor for meteors. The Aztecs were obsessive astronomers, tracking celestial events with unnerving precision, and meteor showers, especially the Perseids, visible every August, would have looked exactly like arrows raining from the heavens. Were the priests describing a spiritual trial, or a cosmic phenomenon they'd woven into their mythology? Scholars still argue about it over conference coffee, and nobody's won yet. Either way, you survive. Barely. Riddled with phantom wounds, lighter somehow, less there than you were a moment ago. And that's when you hear it. Growling. Low, rumbling, the kind of sound that vibrates in your chest even when you're pretty sure you don't have a chest anymore. Level 7. Teocoyocualoa, the place where beasts devour hearts. The name is distressingly literal. A massive jaguar emerges from the shadows, because of course there are shadows now, conveniently timed for maximum dread, and its eyes glow with that peculiar green-gold fire you only see in predators who know their apex. Jaguars were sacred to the Aztecs, symbols of night, warfare, and the underworld itself. Priests wore jaguar pelts during sacrificial ceremonies, becoming the beast, channeling its power. And here in Mictlan, the jaguar doesn't just kill, it consumes. Specifically, your heart, the seat of memory, emotion, identity, and Aztec cosmology. Your heart is the last piece of who you were, and the jaguar wants it. You run. Obviously, you run. But running in the underworld is like running in a dream. Your legs move, the distance never changes, and the growling just gets closer. Eventually, you stop. Not because you're brave, but because you're tired. And some small part of you, the part that's been walking this road for what feels like years now, understands. The jaguar isn't your enemy. It's a functionary. a cosmic accountant with teeth. It pads forward, close enough that you can smell the earth on its fur, the old blood, the memory of 1,000 consumed souls. It opens its jaws. You close your eyes, and when those fangs sink in, ripping away the last remnant of your human heart, the relief is almost unbearable. You don't need it anymore. You won't need anything soon. But not yet. Not quite yet. Because you've still got 2 levels to go, and the 8th is arguably the worst. Remember that freezing wind from level 4? The one that started erasing your memories? Well, congratulations. It's back, and it's brought friends. Mictlantecuhtli. The coldest level is exactly what it sounds like. A frozen wasteland where rivers of ice wind through valleys of frost, and the temperature drops so low that even the concept of warmth becomes abstract. The Aztecs lived in a tropical climate, modern-day Mexico, where winter means slightly less humid, so their vision of ultimate suffering naturally included freezing to death. You wade into rivers that crackle and hiss, ice forming on your spectral skin, if skin is even the right word anymore. The cold doesn't just hurt, it numbs. Thought slows, movement becomes sluggish, and beneath the ice you can see them. Other souls, frozen mid-journey, eyes wide and empty, waiting for the thaw that will never come. You keep moving. You have to. Because ahead, barely visible through the frost and the fading light, you can see it. The 9th level. Mictlan proper. The final stop. Where Mictecacihuatl waits with her skull smile and her infinite patience, ready to welcome you home. Chikuna Mictlan, the 9th level, the last level, the place where your 4-year journey finally, mercifully ends. You step out of the frozen rivers. Remember those icy waters that nearly trapped you forever. And the temperature doesn't so much rise as stop mattering. Everything stops mattering here. The air is still. The light is dim and sourceless, like twilight that's forgotten how to become night. And there, sitting on a throne made of bones that somehow look comfortable, is Mictecacihuatl herself, the Lady of the Dead, Queen of Mictlan, the woman who's been waiting for you since before you were born. She's smiling. Of course she's smiling. Her jaw is fleshless, her eye sockets empty, her body adorned with marigold flowers and strips of ceremonial paper. And yet somehow, impossibly, she radiates warmth. Not the scary kind of warmth, not the I'm going to devour your essence warmth, but genuine hospitality. Welcome home, traveler. You made it. Sit down. Rest. The Aztecs didn't fear Mictecacihuatl the way medieval Europeans feared demons. She wasn't a tormentor or a devil. She was a host, a cosmic innkeeper managing the longest, strangest hotel in existence, where every guest checks in, but nobody ever leaves. Because leaving implies you still exist as a distinct entity, and that's not really the vibe down here anymore. Here's a mainstream historical fact that blows most people's minds. The Aztecs didn't believe most people went to Mictlan. Warriors who died in battle, straight to the sun god's paradise. Women who died in childbirth, same deal. They were warriors too, having fought and lost against the ultimate enemy, birth itself. People who drowned, got struck by lightning, or died of certain diseases went to Tlalocan, a lush garden paradise ruled by the rain god. Mictlan was reserved for everyone else, people who died ordinary deaths, old age, illness, accidents, the inglorious majority. which means if you're here, congratulations. You lived a completely unremarkable life and died an unremarkable death. Your prize? This 4-year obstacle course through hell-adjacent real estate, culminating in total ego death. The Aztecs really knew how to make a person feel special. But here's the quirky tidbit that makes it all slightly less depressing. Mictecacihuatl loved her job. Spanish chroniclers recorded that she presided over festivals of the dead with genuine joy, watching over the bones of the deceased like a gardener tending flowers. Every November, during what the Aztecs called Mictlantecuhtli, the Festival of the Dead, families would light candles, leave offerings of food and drink, and celebrate their deceased relatives. Not mourn them, celebrate them. Because death wasn't an ending, it was a transformation. Your body returned to the earth, your soul returned to Mictlan, and eventually, after enough time dissolved in the lady's presence, even your soul would dissolve too, becoming part of the great cosmic nothing from which everything springs. Scholars debate whether this represents true annihilation or some form of recycled consciousness, reincarnation by another name. But the texts are frustratingly vague on that point. Maybe the Aztecs themselves didn't know. Maybe they didn't want to know. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Mictecacihuatl gestures for you to approach. Her fingers are bone, delicate and precise, each one carved with tiny glyphs you can't quite read. She doesn't speak, not in words anyway, but you understand her perfectly. The journey is over. The tests are complete. You've been stripped of memory, identity, desire, fear, even the basic sense of you-ness that once seemed so important. And now? Now you get to rest. Not the kind of rest where you sleep and dream and wake up refreshed. The kind of rest where you stop entirely. Where the boundaries between self and universe blur and fade and finally, peacefully, vanish. You sit beside her throne. Other souls are here too, you realize. Thousands of them, millions maybe, all in various stages of dissolution. Some still vaguely human-shaped, others just impressions, echoes, the memory of a memory. And they're all calm. Content. This is what peace looks like in Aztec cosmology. Not eternal bliss, not reunion with loved ones, not harps and clouds and infinite Sundays, just the quiet, gradual return to the source. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, souls to the void. A strange thought occurs to you. Well, to what's left of you. The Aztecs got it right, didn't they? Not the details, maybe. Maybe there aren't literal jaguars or obsidian mountains in whatever comes after death. But the essence? The understanding that death is a process, not an event? That letting go takes time and effort and a willingness to be unmade? Modern neuroscience tells us consciousness is an emergent property of complex systems, a pattern that arises from electrochemical signals, and then, when those signals stop, simply ends. No fanfare, no tunnel of light, just cessation. The Aztecs reached the same conclusion 1,500 years ago without MRI machines or peer-reviewed journals. They just dressed it up in mythology and metaphor, gave it a skeleton queen and a 4-year timeline, and called it Mictlan. Mictecacihuatl's smile widens. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe skulls just look like they're smiling. Maybe you're projecting because you want her to be pleased with you. She reaches out, touches what used to be your forehead, and the last tiny spark of self-awareness flickers. You think, I was someone once. I had a name. I loved. I feared. and then you don't. The ninth level embraces you. Mictlan, the final home, where all journeys end and all travelers rest. Mictecacihuatl tends her garden of souls, patient and eternal, as she's done for millennia and will do for millennia more. Above, in the world of the living, someone lights a candle for you. They speak your name, they remember. But down here, you're finally, beautifully free. Welcome home, traveler. Welcome to the end. You're standing in the deepest part of Mictlan, where light doesn't so much shine as remember how to exist. And there she is. Mictecacihuatl, the Lady of the Dead, sitting on her throne of femurs and vertebrae like it's the most natural thing in the world. Her skull gleams in the dim glow, polished bone, flawless and eternal, and her jaw hangs open in what could be a scream or a laugh or, most unsettlingly, a smile of genuine welcome. She's wearing a skirt made of serpents, because apparently in Aztec fashion circles, reptilian couture never goes out of style, and her ribcage is adorned with paper banners and marigold flowers that somehow stay fresh despite being, in the literal land of the dead. She sees you. She's always seen you. And that smile, if you can call the permanent grin of a skull a smile, never wavers. Let's back up. How does someone become the Queen of Death? It's not like there was a job posting on the cosmic bulletin board. Wanted, deity to manage infinite deceased souls, must be comfortable with bones. Eternity experience preferred. The Aztec creation myths are delightfully vague on Mictecacihuatl's origin, but here's what we know. She's old. Not been around a few centuries old, but existed before the current version of reality old. The Aztecs believed the universe had been created and destroyed 4 times before the world they inhabited, each era ending in catastrophe, each new creation built on the bones of the last. Mictecacihuatl was there for all of it, waiting in the dark, collecting the remains, preparing for the next batch of souls who'd inevitably need somewhere to rest. She didn't choose this job. She is this job. Death incarnate, feminine and patient, the cosmic undertaker who never takes a day off because, well, people keep dying. She's married, by the way. Her husband is Mictlantecuhtli, the Lord of the Dead, and if you think she looks unsettling, wait until you see him. A skeleton deity with a skull for a head, obviously, liver exposed, covered in human eyes, and perpetually hungry for the souls of the living. Romantic, right? Together they rule Mictlan from a palace deep beneath the earth, and scholars debate whether they represent a genuine partnership or a cosmic duality, male and female, sun and moon, active destruction versus patient reception. The texts don't give us cute couple anecdotes or marital spats. They just show 2 deities sitting side by side in the dark, managing the afterlife with the calm efficiency of long-married partners who've stopped needing to talk because they already know what the other's thinking. Here's a mainstream historical fact that frames everything. The Aztecs didn't fear Mictecacihuatl. They honored her. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 1500s, they were horrified by the Aztec relationship with death. The skull imagery, the bone decorations, the festivals celebrating mortality. Europeans saw death as the enemy, the final punishment for original sin, something to be feared and fought and mourned. But the Aztecs, they saw death as a destination, an inevitability, sure, but not a tragedy. and Mictecacihuatl was the hostess of that destination. The goddess who welcomed you home after your 4-year journey through Mictlan's 9 levels. Remember those jaguars and Frisian rivers and obsidian mountains? She's the reason you endured them. The reward at the end. Not heaven, not paradise, but rest. True, complete, ego-dissolving rest. Now here's the quirky tidbit that'll keep you up tonight. Mictecacihuatl loved children. Not in a creepy way, get your mind out of the gutter, but in the sense that the Aztecs believed she had a special fondness for the souls of infants and young children who died before experiencing life. They went straight to her, bypassing the 9 levels entirely, and she'd cradle them in her bone arms, singing songs that no living person ever heard. There was even a special tree in Mictlan, a cosmic tree that dripped milk from its branches, where the souls of dead babies would gather and drink until they were strong enough to be reborn. Whether this represents literal reincarnation or metaphorical continuation is something scholars still argue about over increasingly tense academic dinners, because the Aztec texts dance around the specifics like a politician avoiding a direct question. You look at Mictecacihuatl now, really look at her, and you start to understand why the Aztecs carved her face into every ceremonial skull, why they painted her image on temple walls, why priests would dress as her during festivals, their faces painted to resemble bone, their bodies draped in flower garlands. She wasn't a monster. She was a promise. The guarantee that no matter how hard life got, no matter how much you suffered or struggled or failed, there was a place waiting for you at the end. A queen who'd smile at your arrival, who'd know your name even after you'd forgotten it yourself. Her palace is exactly what you'd expect from a deity who's been collecting bones for multiple cosmic ages, vast, echoing, and decorated with the skeletal remains of literally everyone who's ever died an ordinary death. Femurs line the hallways like columns in a cathedral. Skulls are stacked in neat pyramids that would make an architect weep with envy. Rib cages hang from the ceiling like chandeliers, and somewhere in the distance you hear the soft click, click, click of bone wind chimes swaying in a breeze that has no earthly source. It should be horrifying. By all rights, you should be sprinting in the opposite direction, screaming into the void. But somehow, impossibly, it feels safe. Mictecacihuatl moves through her domain with the grace of a curator in a museum, adjusting a tibia here, repositioning a pelvis there, treating each skeletal fragment with the reverence it deserves. Because to her, these aren't just bones, they're people, or they were, and she remembers every single one. This is her sacred duty, the core function that defines her existence. Mictecacihuatl is the keeper of bones. When your body dies and decomposes, when worms and bacteria reduce you to your basic components, when time and earth reclaim everything soft and vulnerable about you, your skeleton remains. And those bones, they belong to her. The Aztecs understood this on a profound level. They didn't cremate their dead, usually. There were exceptions for warriors and nobility, preferring to bury them so the bones could return to the earth, sink down through layers of soil and stone, and eventually reach Mictlan, where the lady was waiting to catalog them. She knew the shape of your skull, the curve of your spine, the specific way your knee joints had worn down over decades of walking. Your bones told the story of your life more honestly than any eulogy ever could, and Mictecacihuatl read them like sacred texts. Here's a mainstream historical fact that genuinely amazed early Spanish chroniclers. The Aztecs held massive festivals in her honor, and they were celebrations, not funerary dirges. The most important was Mictlantecuhtli, the Festival of the Dead, which occurred during the 9th month of the Aztec calendar, roughly corresponding to late July or early August in the European system. For an entire month, families would clean and decorate the graves of their deceased relatives, build elaborate altars called ofrendas in their homes, and leave offerings of food, drink, flowers, and incense. And here's the wild part. They believed the dead would actually return during this time. Not as ghosts or zombies, nothing so crass, but as spiritual presences drawn by the scent of marigolds and the sound of living voices calling their names. Mictecacihuatl herself would open the gates of Mictlan, releasing souls for a brief, precious reunion with the world above. It was her gift to the living, proof that death doesn't erase love, doesn't sever connections, doesn't end the story. It just changes the setting. The priests would dress as Mictecacihuatl during these festivals, painting their faces white with bone-patterned designs, wearing skulls as masks, draping themselves in flower garlands and ceremonial paper. They'd dance through the streets, visiting homes, blessing altars, embodying the goddess who walked between worlds. And people would laugh. They'd sing. They'd feast and drink pulque, that fermented agave beverage that tastes like slightly alcoholic snot. Don't ask how I know. And tell stories about the deceased, remembering their quirks and jokes and embarrassing moments. Because Mictecacihuatl didn't demand solemnity. She didn't require grief. She understood that the best way to honor the dead was to remember them as they were. Flawed, funny, fully human. Now here's the quirky tidbit that makes anthropologists absolutely giddy. Mictecacihuatl had competition. Well, not competition exactly, but the Aztec afterlife was surprisingly crowded with death deities, each with their own specialty. Solotl guided souls through the underworld. Cihuateteo collected women who died in childbirth. Various Tzitzimime, skeletal star demons, waited to devour the world during solar eclipses. But Mictecacihuatl was the only one who actively welcomed the dead. The others were guards, guides, or threats. She was a host. And fascinatingly, she's the only major Aztec deity whose mythology explicitly portrays her as nurturing. Most Aztec gods were terrifying, demanding blood sacrifice, threatening cosmic destruction, generally acting like divine psychopaths with anger management issues. But Mictecacihuatl, she just wanted to collect your bones, store them safely, and occasionally let your soul visit your family during festival season. If the Aztec pantheon had a customer satisfaction survey, she'd score off the charts. Scholars debate whether her role represents a survival of earlier, pre-Aztec beliefs, whether she was inherited from the Toltecs or Olmecs or some even older Mesoamerican culture. But the evidence is frustratingly sparse. What we know is that by the time the Aztecs dominated central Mexico in the 14th and 15th centuries, Mictecacihuatl was already ancient, already embedded so deeply in the spiritual architecture of the region that removing her would have been like trying to extract the foundation from a building while people were still living inside. You watch her now, moving through her palace of bones, adjusting fragments with infinite care, and you understand. This is love. Strange, skeletal, eternal love. The kind that doesn't flinch at decay, doesn't recoil from mortality, doesn't pretend death is anything other than what it is. She smiles at every skull because she knows the person it once belonged to. She tends every bone because she remembers the life it supported. And when your time comes, when you complete that 4-year journey and arrive at her throne, she'll smile at you too. Welcome home, she'll say without words. I've been keeping your bones warm. Then the Spanish arrived, and everything went sideways. 1519, Hernán Cortés lands on the coast of what will eventually be called Mexico, takes one look at the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, with its temple pyramids and skull racks and festivals celebrating death, and decides, with the confidence of a man who's never questioned his own cultural superiority, that these people are worshipping demons. The priests tried to explain. Mictecacihuatl isn't a demon. She's a psychopomp, a guide, a cosmic caretaker. She doesn't demand sacrifice. Well, okay, technically there were sacrifices, but not to her specifically. It's complicated. Look, you have to understand the cosmological context, but the Spanish weren't interested in nuance. They saw skulls, they saw bones, they saw indigenous people honoring death instead of fearing it. And they filed the whole thing under satanic paganism in their mental filing cabinet. Within a few decades, the temples were torn down, the festivals were banned, and Mictecacihuatl's name was supposed to be forgotten forever, buried under the weight of Catholic colonization and European certainty. Except, and this is where it gets interesting, she didn't disappear. She just went underground, literally and figuratively. Because here's the thing about a goddess who rules the realm of the dead. She's patient. She knows how to wait. And while the Spanish built their churches on top of Aztec temples, while they forced conversions and burned codices and tried to erase thousands of years of indigenous spirituality, the people remembered. They kept celebrating the Festival of the Dead. Only now they called it Dia de los Muertos and moved it to coincide with the Catholic All Saints' Day. They kept building altars, kept leaving offerings, kept painting their faces like skulls during festivals. The names changed, the dates shifted. But Mictecacihuatl's essence, that smiling, bone-collecting, death-welcoming spirit, survived. Because you can't kill a goddess of death. She's already dead. That's literally her entire job description. Fast forward to the early 20th century, and something remarkable happens. Mictecacihuatl gets a makeover. Mexican artist José Guadalupe Posada creates a satirical etching called La Calavera Catrina, an elegant skeleton woman wearing a fancy European hat, mocking the Mexican upper classes who were trying to adopt European customs while pretending their indigenous heritage didn't exist. The image explodes in popularity. Diego Rivera later paints her into his famous murals, giving her a full skeletal body in elaborate dress. And gradually, La Catrina becomes synonymous with Dia de los Muertos, a symbol of Mexican cultural identity, a reminder that death comes for everyone regardless of wealth or status. Is La Catrina the same as Mictecacihuatl? Scholars debate this constantly. Some argue she's a direct continuation. Others insist she's a modern creation with only superficial connections to the ancient goddess. But ask anyone celebrating Dia de los Muertos, and they'll tell you, that smiling skull face? That's the Lady of the Dead. She never left. She just changed her hat. Here's a mainstream historical fact that beautifully illustrates her survival. UNESCO declared Dia de los Muertos an intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2008, recognizing it as one of the most important indigenous traditions still practiced in the Americas. Every November, millions of people across Mexico and beyond build altars, leave offerings of marigolds and pan de muerto, that sweet bread shaped like bones. Remember those bone wind chimes in her palace? The symbolism is everywhere. Light candles and welcome the spirits of their deceased loved ones home for a visit. The rituals have evolved, mixed with Catholic elements, incorporated modern touches like photographs and favorite foods and inside jokes, but the core remains unchanged. Death is not the enemy. The dead are not lost. And somewhere, in the deep places beneath consciousness, Mictecacihuatl still smiles, still tends her collection of bones, still welcomes every spirit that completes the journey. Now here's the quirky tidbit that should honestly be taught in every anthropology class. Mictecacihuatl is having a cultural moment. Like, right now. The 2017 Pixar film Coco introduced her aesthetic, if not her name, to hundreds of millions of people worldwide, popularizing the concept of the land of the dead as a vibrant, colorful, joyful place where ancestors live on as long as they're remembered. Dia de los Muertos celebrations have exploded in popularity far beyond Mexico, with cities across the United States, Canada, and Europe hosting festivals, parades, and altar-building workshops. Fashion designers incorporate skull imagery into haute couture. Makeup artists create elaborate sugar skull face paint tutorials on YouTube. And through it all, commercialized, globalized, sometimes appropriated in ways that make cultural historians wince, Mictecacihuatl's essential message persists. Death is natural, memory is sacred, and the dead deserve celebration, not fear. You're back in her throne room now, surrounded by bones that span millennia, and you realize something profound. She won. The conquistadors tried to erase her. The Catholic Church tried to replace her. Time itself tried to render her obsolete. But here she sits, eternal and patient, her skull smile unchanged. Because empires fall, religions evolve, cultures transform. But death remains constant. And as long as people die, as long as the living miss the dead, as long as anyone anywhere builds an altar or lights a candle or says a name and remembers, Mictecacihuatl endures. She gestures to you now, one final time, and you understand the invitation. Not to die. You'll do that on your own schedule, thanks. But to remember, to acknowledge, to accept that someday, when your 4-year journey through whatever comes after ends, there'll be a smiling skull face waiting to welcome you home. She'll know your bones. She'll remember your name even after you've forgotten it. And she'll add you to her collection with the same care she's shown every soul that came before you. The Lady of the Dead doesn't take. She receives. And when your time comes, she'll receive you too. With that eternal smile, that patient grace, that cosmic hospitality that's endured for thousands of years and will endure for thousands more. Death comes for everyone, but so does Mictecacihuatl. And honestly, given the options, you could do a lot worse than spending eternity in her palace of bones, tended by a goddess who's been perfecting the art of welcoming the dead since before your ancestors' ancestors learned to bury their loved ones with flowers. The world ends, not metaphorically, not eventually, now. The sky cracks like an eggshell, the earth convulses, and everything you know dissolves into cosmic static. Congratulations, you've just witnessed the apocalypse, or rather, an apocalypse, because in Aztec cosmology, the world doesn't end once in some future tribulation. It ends repeatedly. 4 times already, in fact, and you're currently standing in the smoking ruins of the 4th failed attempt at creation, wondering if the gods are going to bother with a 5th try, or just call it quits and let the void have its way. Let's rewind. In the beginning, and by beginning, we mean the first time the gods decided to play cosmic architects, there was the first sun, called Nahui-Ocelotl, 4 Jaguar. The gods created humans, gave them a world to inhabit. And everything was going reasonably well until someone, probably Tezcatlipoca, that trickster god who makes Loki look like a well-adjusted life coach, decided the first humans weren't sufficiently reverent. So the sun fell from the sky, darkness consumed everything, and giant jaguars descended to devour every single human being. Just ate them all. The Aztecs didn't mess around with their catastrophe narratives. When the world ended, it ended thoroughly. No survival bunkers, no chosen remnants, just jaguars and screaming and then silence. The gods, being immortal and apparently incapable of learning from their mistakes, tried again. Second sun, Nahui-Ehekiatl, 4 wind. New humans, new world. Same pattern of divine disappointment. This time, the god Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who we'll be spending a lot of quality time with shortly, got into an argument with Tezcatlipoca, shocking absolutely no one. And the result in a cosmic tantrum manifested as hurricanes of apocalyptic proportions. Winds so strong they ripped humans from the earth and flung them into the sky, where they transformed into monkeys. Yes, monkeys. The Aztecs looked at primates and thought, you know what those are? Failed humans, literally. Which, given how monkeys behave, isn't entirely wrong. Third sun, Nahui-Cuiahuitl, 4 rain. You'd think the gods would have gotten the hang of this creation thing by now, but no. This time they made humans. The humans displeased the gods. The texts are vague on specifics. Maybe they didn't say thank you enough. And the sky opened up with a rain of fire. Not water. Fire. Volcanic ash, burning stones. Rivers of lava cascading from the heavens, turning every living thing into charcoal. The survivors? Transformed into turkeys and dogs. The Aztecs had a whole taxonomy of cosmic failure, categorizing the animal kingdom, by which apocalypse your ancestors couldn't survive. Fourth sun, Nahui-Atl, 4 water. Here's where it gets interesting, because this is the world immediately before yours. The gods created humans again. Seriously, the persistence is almost admirable, and for a while, things seemed stable. But then the goddess Chalchiuhtlicue, deity of rivers and streams, wept. Some sources say she wept from sorrow at humanity's wickedness. Others suggest the gods themselves made her cry. Either way, her tears flooded the entire world. We're talking Noah's Ark levels of inundation, except without the ark, without the divine warning, without any survivors. The waters rose for 52 years, a full Aztec calendar cycle, until every human drowned and transformed into fish, the oceans you swim in today. According to Aztec mythology, their graveyards, filled with the descendants of failed humanity. Here's a mainstream historical fact that reframes everything. The Aztecs genuinely believed they were living in the fifth sun, a temporary creation destined to end just like the previous four. Their entire civilization operated under the shadow of inevitable apocalypse. The current world, they understood, would end in earthquakes, Nahue Olin, four movement, when the earth itself would shatter and swallow everything. This wasn't pessimism, it was realism. The world ends, it always ends, and the only question was, how long could humanity delay the inevitable? Now here's the quirky tidbit that should unsettle you. Scholars debate whether these creation myths represent actual historical memories, whether ancient Mesoamericans experienced catastrophic climate events, volcanic eruptions, floods, and encoded those traumas into religious narratives, or whether they're purely symbolic, representing cycles of cultural transformation. Either way, the Aztecs understood something modern civilization is only beginning to grasp. We're not the first. We won't be the last. And the bones of every failed attempt at existence are buried somewhere beneath our feet. So there you stand, in the wasteland between the fourth and fifth suns, surrounded by the ashes of gods and the pulverized remains of previous humanities. The universe is silent, empty, waiting. And somewhere in the darkness, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the god of wind and learning and occasionally terrible decisions, has an idea. A dangerous, brilliant, completely insane idea. He's going to steal bones from the underworld. He's going to descend into Mictlan. Remember that 9-level nightmare realm with the jaguars and the freezing rivers and Mictecacihuatl's eternal bone collection? Sneak past the Lord and Lady of the Dead. Grab the skeletal remains of previous humans and use them to create you. The fifth attempt. The final try. Humanity reborn from the fragments of failure. What could possibly go wrong? Quetzalcoatl descends. And when a god descends into the underworld, it's not like taking an elevator down to a particularly depressing basement. It's a journey, the kind that rewrites the physics of existence, where up becomes down, light becomes shadow, and time moves like honey through broken glass. The feathered serpent, normally radiant and magnificent, dims as he passes through the first level of Mictlan. His feathers lose their iridescent sheen. His divine light gutters like a candle in wind. Because Mictlan doesn't care if you're a god. Death is the great equalizer, and the moment you enter its domain, you're subject to its rules, or lack thereof. He navigates the 9 levels, past the rivers and the grinding mountains and those freezing winds that strip away memory. Until finally, he stands before the throne of Mictlantecuhtli, Lord of the Dead. Picture this: a skeletal deity covered in human eyes, his liver exposed and dangling, his jaw perpetually open in a grin that manages to be both welcoming and absolutely terrifying. Mictecacihuatl sits beside him. Remember her eternal smile, her bone-collecting tendencies, her cosmic hospitality? And together they regard Quetzalcoatl with the patient curiosity of beings who have literally all of eternity to see how this plays out. "I've come for the bones," Quetzalcoatl announces, because apparently divine subtlety isn't a thing. The precious bones of previous humans. "I need them to create a new people for the fifth sun." Mictlantecuhtli considers this. His eye-covered body seems to ripple with inner amusement. "Of course," he says, his voice like wind through empty tombs. "You may take the bones, but first." And here's where you know things are about to get complicated, because nothing in mythology ever comes without conditions. "You must circle my realm 4 times while blowing this conch shell trumpet." He hands Quetzalcoatl a conch shell. Except, and this is where the Lord of the Dead reveals his sense of humor, it's a solid conch shell. No holes, no openings, completely unblowable. It's the divine equivalent of handing someone a door that's actually a wall and saying, "Go ahead, walk through." Mictlantecuhtli sits back on his throne, waiting for the feathered serpent to admit defeat, give up, leave the bones where they belong, in the underworld, forever. But Quetzalcoatl didn't become one of the most important gods in the Aztec pantheon by giving up at the first impossible task. He summons worms, actual worms, the kind that burrow and consume, and they drill holes through the conch shell. Then he calls upon bees, who fly into the shell and buzz with such fury that it sounds like the world's most aggressive trumpet blast. Quetzalcoatl circles Mictlan once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, the conch shell, wormhole, bee trumpet echoing through the 9 levels, and Mictlantecuhtli's grin falters. Just slightly. Just enough. "Fine," the Lord of the Dead concedes. "Take the bones." Here's a mainstream historical fact that contextualizes everything. This myth was recorded in the Florentine Codex, a 12-volume ethnographic work compiled by Spanish Franciscan friar Bernardino de Sahagún and Aztec scribes between 1545 and 1590. It's one of the most comprehensive records of Aztec culture and mythology we have. Written in both Spanish and Nahuatl, the Aztec language. Without it, stories like Quetzalcoatl's bone heist would have been lost forever, buried under colonial erasure and cultural genocide. The fact that we know this tale at all is a minor miracle of preservation, achieved by indigenous scribes who risked everything to record their heritage before it vanished. So Quetzalcoatl gathers the bones, precious ancient things, fragments of the first sun, the second, the third, the fourth, all the failed attempts at humanity compressed into skeletal form. He bundles them carefully, cradling them like a mother carrying a child, and begins the long climb back to the surface world. And this is where Mictlantecuhtli reveals he's an excellent sore loser. "Wait!" the Lord of the Dead calls out. "I've changed my mind. The bones stay here." He sends his minions, the servants of death, the minor deities who manage the underworld's daily operations, to chase down the feathered serpent. They swarm after Quetzalcoatl like angry wasps, howling and shrieking, their voices echoing through the 9 levels. The god runs. Not flying. He can't fly in Mictlan. Gravity works differently here. Physics is more of a suggestion than a law. But running, clutching the bones, desperate to reach the surface before the servants catch him. And then, because cosmic mythology loves irony, he trips. Just trips. Over what? A quail, according to some versions. A crack in the ground, according to others. Scholars debate the specifics constantly, because apparently the exact cause of a deity's stumble is academically significant. Quetzalcoatl falls, the bones scatter. And in that moment, that crucial, devastating moment, they break, shatter into fragments of different sizes, some large, some small, some barely bigger than dust. The precious bones of previous humanity, the carefully preserved remains that were supposed to create a perfect new people, lie scattered and broken on the floor of Mictlan, while the servants of death close in and Mictlantecuhtli's laughter echoes through the darkness. Now here's the quirky tidbit that recontextualizes humanity's entire existence. Some versions of the myth claim the quail that tripped Quetzalcoatl was sent by Mictlantecuhtli specifically, a divine sabotage, a cosmic prank. And the result? The broken bones, when finally gathered and reassembled, created humans of different sizes. Tall people, short people, everyone in between, all because a god tripped over a bird in the underworld. The Aztecs looked at human diversity and explained it through divine clumsiness, which is either profound or hilarious or both. Quetzalcoatl gathers the broken pieces, every fragment, every shard, refusing to leave even the smallest bit behind, and finally escapes to the surface world. But the damage is done. The bones are broken. Humanity, before it even draws breath, is already flawed, already incomplete, already fragmented. And the gods, gathered in Teotihuacan to witness the creation of the fifth sun, look at the scattered bones and understand. This time, creation will require more than theft. It will require sacrifice. The gods gather in Teotihuacan, the place where gods are born, and the broken bones lie before them like a cosmic puzzle with missing pieces. Quetzalcoatl arranges them carefully in a jade basin, this precious vessel that the Aztecs called Tecpatl, trying to make the fragments fit together, trying to create something whole from something shattered. But bones, even divine bones stolen from the underworld, don't spontaneously become people. They need something more, something vital, something that transforms calcium and marrow and ancient death into breathing, thinking, feeling life. They need blood. Not just any blood, divine blood. The gods look at each other with the slow realization of people who've just volunteered for something they didn't fully think through. Because here's the thing about Aztec creation mythology that makes it fundamentally different from, say, Genesis, where God just speaks and things exist. Creation in the Aztec worldview costs. Nothing comes free. Life requires death, birth requires sacrifice. And if you want to make humans, real, viable, fifth attempt humans, who might actually survive longer than their four predecessor versions, the gods themselves have to pay the price. Quetzalcoatl goes first. He takes an obsidian blade. Remember those razor-sharp, volcanic glass mountains from the third level of Mictlan? Same material, weaponized, and draws it across his body. Not a little prick on the finger like you'd do for a blood sugar test. A cut, deep enough to matter, deep enough to hurt, even for a god. His blood, luminous and strange, drips onto the broken bones. And here's where it gets beautifully weird. The blood doesn't just pool, it seeps in. The bones absorb it like desert sand drinking rain, pulling the divine essence into their ancient structure, beginning the alchemical transformation from death to life. But one god's blood isn't enough. The other deities step forward. Tezcatlipoca, Yes, the same God who ended the first two worlds. Apparently he's reformed or at least willing to help. Tlaloc, the rain god. Totec, the god of renewal and agricultural cycles, and more. Each one cuts themselves. Each one bleeds onto the bones. And with every contribution, the fragments begin to shift, to knit together, to reshape themselves into something that resembles humanity. Arms, legs, torsos. Skulls that will eventually hold brains capable of philosophy and art, and probably YouTube comment sections. Here's a mainstream historical fact that illuminates the entire cultural context. Human sacrifice in Aztec society wasn't random violence or primitive barbarism, despite what European conquistadors claimed. It was cosmic maintenance. The Aztecs genuinely believed the gods had sacrificed themselves to create humanity, and therefore humans owed an eternal debt, a blood debt that could only be repaid through reciprocal sacrifice. The sun itself required blood to rise each morning. The earth needed blood to produce crops. The universe in Aztec cosmology ran on sacrifice the way modern civilization runs on fossil fuels. Was this belief system horrifying? By modern standards, absolutely. But was it internally consistent, spiritually profound, and based on the creation myth you're witnessing right now? Also, yes. The bones absorb the divine blood, and finally, they stir. The fragments fuse. Flesh grows over bone. Organs materialize. Skin forms, covering everything, holding it all together. And then, breath. The first humans of the fifth sun draw air into brand new lungs, open eyes that have never seen sunlight, and stumble to their feet in Teotihuacan, surrounded by bleeding gods who look simultaneously exhausted and proud. Like parents who've just finished assembling extremely complicated furniture. But here's the thing, and this is crucial. This is the part that defines everything about humanity in Aztec thought. These new humans are made from broken bones and divine sacrifice. You are fundamentally flawed. Not because you sinned, not because you failed some cosmic test, but because the bones that formed your ancestors were shattered before they were ever assembled. You're imperfect by design, and you exist only because gods bled for you. This dual nature, broken yet sacred, mortal yet born from immortal sacrifice, creates an obligation, a cosmic debt that can never be fully repaid, but must be eternally acknowledged. Now here's the quirky tidbit that scholars love to argue about during particularly contentious academic conferences. Some versions of the myth include a goddess named Cihuacoatl, Snake Woman, who grinds the bones into flour before the gods bleed on them. She takes a metate, that traditional stone grinding tool used for corn, and crushes the stolen bones into fine powder, mixing them with divine blood to create a dough. Humans as bread. Born from ingredients, baked in cosmic ovens, the ultimate meal that feeds existence itself. Whether this represents an alternative tradition or a later addition to the myth is something researchers debate with surprising passion. Because apparently, the theological implications of whether you're made from whole bones or bone flour actually matter. The first humans of the fifth sun stand in Teotihuacan, still dripping with divine blood, still figuring out how limbs work, and the gods step back to admire their creation. Are you perfect? No. Remember, those bones were broken. You're fundamentally flawed. That's baked into your structure. Are you immortal? Absolutely not. You're made from dead bones. Mortality is literally your raw material. But are you alive? Yes. Breathing, thinking, capable of creating civilizations and art and mathematics and enormous temples where future generations will reenact this very story through blood sacrifice and ritual and the endless attempt to repay the debt your existence incurred. And here's the profound, unsettling truth at the heart of this myth. You didn't ask to be created. You didn't volunteer for existence. God stole bones from the underworld, broke them through cosmic clumsiness, bled on them until they became you. And now you're here, alive, conscious, burdened with existence, and indebted to forces you never chose. The Aztecs understood something that modern existentialism is still wrestling with. Being alive is complicated, morally ambiguous, and absolutely nobody asked your permission first. The gods look at you, at all of humanity, scattered across Teotihuacan, slowly learning to walk and speak and wonder why they exist. And Quetzalcoatl smiles, not with triumph, not with pride, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who broke every rule, risked everything, bled himself dry, and created something beautiful from the ashes of failure. You are the flower of bones, born from death, watered with divine blood, destined to end when the fifth sun finally fails and earthquakes swallow everything. But until then, you're alive. Flawed, mortal, magnificent, and impossible. The gods did that. For you. Try not to waste it. The air smells different today. You notice it the moment you wake. Something sweet and earthy, floral but tinged with smoke. Like someone's burning flowers mixed with copal resin. It's the 9th month of the Aztec calendar, roughly late July or early August if you're keeping track with European systems. And Tenochtitlan is transforming. The great city, built on an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, connected to the mainland by massive causeways that still make modern engineers shake their heads in admiration, hums with preparation. But this isn't preparation for war or tribute collection, or one of those elaborate state ceremonies where nobles parade around in jaguar pelts. This is something gentler, something that exists in the space between grief and celebration, between memory and presence, between the living world and Mictlan. Welcome to Mictlantecuhtli, the festival of the dead. You walk through the streets and everywhere, families are building altars. Not the somber, dusty memorial shelves you might imagine, but elaborate constructions of color and intention. Women arrange offerings on woven mats, tamales still steaming, tortillas stacked in perfect towers, clay cups filled with pulque, that fermented agave drink that tastes like the Aztec equivalent of sour beer. Pottery bowls overflowing with fresh fruit. Children scatter marigold petals, cempasúchil, the flower of 400 petals, creating paths from doorways to altars, golden trails that glow in the morning light. The scent is overwhelming, intoxicating, a combination of flowers and incense and cooking food that makes your stomach growl despite the strangeness of the occasion. Because here's what's happening. What makes this festival so profoundly different from European concepts of mourning? The dead are coming home. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. The Aztecs genuinely believed that during Mictlantecuhtli, Mictecacihuatl, Remember her, the bone-collectin' lady of the dead with her eternal skull smile, would open the gates of Mictlan and release the souls of the deceased. For one brief, precious window of time, the boundary between worlds becomes permeable. Your grandmother who died 3 years ago? She's making the journey right now, climbing back through those 9 levels you learned about, past the freezing rivers and the grinding mountains and the jaguars that devour hearts, drawn upward by the scent of marigolds and the sound of living voices calling her name. Here's a mainstream historical fact that contextualizes everything. The Aztecs didn't have a single Day of the Dead. They had multiple festivals honoring different categories of deceased. Mictlantecuhtli specifically honored adults who had died natural deaths, the ordinary people who went to Mictlan rather than the warrior's paradise or the rain god's garden. There was a separate festival for children who died young, another for those who drowned, another for women who died in childbirth. Death, in Aztec cosmology, was remarkably bureaucratic. Your afterlife destination and your festival date depended entirely on how you died, not who you were as a person. Drown in a river? Congratulations, you get Tlalocan and a different celebration schedule. Die heroically in battle, straight to the sun, different party entirely. Die of old age after a long, boring life? Mictlan and Mictlantecuhtli is your homecoming. You watch families arrange copal incense in ceramic burners, the smoke rising in thick, fragrant columns. The smoke is crucial. It's believed to carry prayers and offerings upward, or in this case, downward, then upward, all the way to Mictlan and back. It's a spiritual GPS system, guiding the dead through the treacherous geography of the underworld and into the living world where their families wait. Some scholars debate whether the Aztecs truly believed in literal soul travel, or whether these were elaborate metaphors for memory and grief processing. But if you asked anyone in Tenochtitlan on this particular morning, they'd look at you like you'd just questioned whether the sun actually rises. Of course, the dead are coming. Can't you smell the marigolds? Can't you feel the shift in the air? Now here's the quirky tidbit that makes this festival even stranger. Dogs played a crucial role. Remember the Mictlantecuhtli, that hairless dog that guides souls across the first river of Mictlan. During Mictlantecuhtli, families would honor dogs, both living and dead, as sacred guides. Some households kept ceramic dog figurines on their altars specifically to help deceased relatives navigate home. Others left offerings of food for neighborhood dogs, thanking them in advance for future psychopomp services. The Aztecs understood something that modern pet owners are just beginning to articulate. Dogs aren't just companions. They're bridges between worlds, creatures who exist comfortably in the space between wild and domestic, between loyal and independent, between the living and the dead. The sun climbs higher. The altars are ready. The marigold paths shimmer golden in the light, and somewhere, beyond sight but not beyond sense, the gates of Mictlan creak open. Mictecacihuatl stands at the threshold, her bone hand gesturing welcome, and the souls begin their ascent. Your ancestors, your dead, coming home for the festival. The living light their candles, and they wait. The sun sets, and the candles multiply. Hundreds of them, thousands maybe, flickering across Tenochtitlan like earthbound stars. You hold one yourself, a simple clay lamp filled with oil, the flame dancing in the evening breeze that sweeps across Lake Texcoco. Around you, families gather at their altars, and the mood is unexpected. You were probably anticipating solemnity, reverent silence, maybe some dignified weeping. Instead, there's laughter. Genuine, warm laughter. A woman tells a story about her deceased husband, something about how he once tried to catch a turkey and ended up chasing it straight into the lake. And her children dissolve into giggles. An elderly man raises a cup of pulque toward the altar and shouts a greeting to his dead brother, his voice carrying the easy affection of someone continuing a conversation that was merely paused, not ended. This is the heart of Mictlantecuhtli, celebration, not mourning. The Aztecs didn't gather to weep over loss. They gathered to welcome guests. Because that's what the dead are tonight. Visitors. Family members who've been away on an extremely long, extremely unpleasant journey through the underworld and have finally made it home for a brief reunion. You don't greet long-absent relatives with tears and black clothing. You greet them with their favorite foods, their favorite drinks, with music and stories and the kind of rowdy affection that says, "We've missed you, we remember you, and holy hell are we glad you're here." The dancing starts as darkness fully settles. Not choreographed temple rituals performed by priests, though those happen too, elsewhere in the city, but spontaneous, familial movement. People sway and spin around the altars, holding their candles carefully so the flames don't extinguish, creating spirals of light in the darkness. The dead can't be seen, of course. They're here as spiritual presences, invisible to mortal eyes, but palpably present. You feel it in the way the candlelight flickers differently near the altars, in the sudden coolness that brushes past your shoulder like someone walking by, in the inexplicable sense that the spaces around the offerings are occupied, even though you see nothing but air. Here's a mainstream historical fact recorded by Spanish chroniclers who witnessed these festivals in the early 1500s. Families would stay awake all night during Mictlantecuhtli, maintaining vigil with their dead. Sleeping was considered disrespectful. You've got one night a year with your deceased grandmother. You don't waste it unconscious. Instead, people told stories, sang songs, shared memories. They'd eat some of the food from the altar themselves. The dead were believed to consume the essence or spiritual nourishment, leaving the physical food for the living. Passing dishes around, turning the whole event into a cosmic potluck where Grandma's soul got first dibs on the tamales. Face painting begins as the night deepens. Adults and children alike use white clay and charcoal to transform themselves into living skulls, drawing bone patterns across their cheeks, darkening their eye sockets, creating the illusion that they too are partially dead. Some scholars debate whether this represents sympathetic magic, making yourself look dead so you can better commune with the dead, or social leveling. Everyone becomes a skeleton eventually, so we might as well acknowledge our shared fate. But the effect is undeniably striking. In the candlelight, with faces painted to resemble skulls, the boundary between living and dead becomes even more permeable. Who's visiting whom? Are the dead coming to the living world, or are the living temporarily joining the dead? Music fills the night. drums and flutes and the haunting sound of conch shell trumpets. Remember Quetzalcoatl's worm-drilled, bee-filled trumpet from his underworld heist. Same basic instrument, different context. The rhythms are hypnotic, repetitive, designed to alter consciousness and facilitate that liminal state where communication with the dead becomes possible. Modern neuroscience would tell you that rhythmic drumming at certain frequencies can induce trance states, affecting brainwave patterns and creating the sensation of expanded awareness. The Aztecs didn't have EEG machines, but they understood the technology of transcendence, the acoustic engineering required to thin the veil between worlds. Now here's the quirky tidbit that anthropologists love. Some families would place small footprints, made from flour or ash, leading from their doorway to the altar, then check them in the morning to see if they'd been disturbed. Physical evidence of spiritual visitation. Most mornings, the footprints would show smudges or patterns that suggested movement, which modern skeptics attribute to wind, humidity, or unconscious disturbance by living family members. But the Aztecs saw proof. The dead came. They walked the path. They found their way home. You dance around the altar now, your candle steady despite the movement, and you understand something profound. This isn't about denying death or pretending loss doesn't hurt. It's about maintaining relationship across the boundary of mortality. Your dead grandmother might be in Mictlan most of the year, dissolving slowly in Mictecacihuatl's palace of bones. But tonight she's here. Not in body, those bones belong to the lady now, but in presence, in memory made tangible, in love that refuses to be bounded by something as trivial as death. The candles burn, the marigolds release their scent, and between the light and the flowers and the laughter, the dead dance too, invisible partners in a celebration that acknowledges the hardest truth of existence. Everyone you love will die, or you will die first, but love itself? Love persists. Love crosses rivers and climbs obsidian mountains, and endures the freezing winds of Mictlan, and finds its way home when the marigolds bloom. Dawn approaches, and the candles begin to gutter. You've been awake all night. Remember, sleeping during Mictlantecuhtli is basically telling your dead relatives, yeah, you traveled through 9 levels of underworld hell to visit, but I'm tired, so... And exhaustion wraps around you like a comfortable blanket. But you can't rest yet, because this is the hardest part of the festival, the moment everyone's been dreading even while they laughed and danced and celebrated, saying goodbye. The dead must return to Mictlan. The gates can't stay open forever. Cosmic bureaucracy has rules. And even Mictecacihuatl, with her infinite patience, has a schedule to maintain. As the eastern sky begins to pale, families gather one last time around their altars. The mood shifts, not to grief exactly, but to something softer, more bittersweet. A mother touches the marigold petals scattered near her altar, whispering words you can't quite hear. An old man raises his empty cup of pulque in a final toast, his voice steady but quiet. Children, exhausted and paint-smudged, lean against their parents, watching the candles die one by one. You extinguish your own candle, pinching the wick between your fingers, feeling the small, sharp heat before the darkness comes. Around you, hundreds of other lights wink out. Tenochtitlan, so brilliant just moments ago, dims, The darkness isn't oppressive, it's gentle, expected, the natural conclusion to a night that existed outside normal time. And in that darkness, you sense it. The dead beginning their descent. Not fleeing, not running, but returning at their own pace. Satisfied and fed and remembered. Ready to complete the journey back to Mictlan, where they belong. Here's a mainstream historical fact that survived the Spanish conquest and still echoes today. This festival never truly ended. When Catholic priests arrived and tried to suppress indigenous religious practices, they discovered something frustrating. You can ban a festival, destroy the temples, punish people for celebrating, but you can't erase the fundamental human need to maintain connection with the dead. So the Church did what colonizers often do when direct suppression fails. They adapted. They moved the Festival of the Dead to coincide with All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day in early November, baptized it with Christian terminology, and hoped the indigenous elements would fade. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Dia de los Muertos today, celebrated across Mexico and increasingly worldwide, is Mictlantecuhtli wearing a Catholic hat. The altars remain, the marigolds remain, the candles, the food offerings, the skull imagery, the fundamental belief that the dead come home when called. All of it survived, transformed but recognizable. Mictecacihuatl's influence persistent under the Virgin Mary's robes. The altars are dismantled slowly, reverently. Families pack away the offerings. Some food is eaten, some is given to the poor. Some is left for animals as a final gift. The marigold petals are swept up, though their scent lingers, clinging to clothing and hair and memory. Scholars debate whether the post-festival cleanup represents a ritual sealing of the boundary between worlds, or simply practical housekeeping. But watching families work in the pre-dawn light, you suspect it's both. The extraordinary must return to ordinary. The liminal space must close. Life, with all its mundane demands, reasserts itself. Now here's the quirky tidbit that ties everything together. Some Aztec families would save a single marigold petal from each Mictlantecuhtli, storing them in special containers throughout the year. By the time someone died, their family would have collected decades of dried petals, flowers from every festival the deceased had participated in during life. These petals would be scattered on the burial shroud, creating a golden path that continued beyond death, a trail the soul could follow during their first journey to Mictlan and back during subsequent festivals. Life and death braided together through flowers, through memory. Through annual reunions that promised eternity wasn't absence, but transformation. The sun rises fully now, spilling golden light across Lake Texcoco, illuminating the great pyramid temples, the causeways, the intricate grid of canals that make Tenochtitlan function. The city returns to itself. Merchants setting up market stalls, warriors training in the courtyards, priests performing morning rituals to coax the sun on its daily journey. The Festival of the Dead is over. Your ancestors have descended back through the 9 levels, past the jaguars and the freezing rivers and the grinding mountains, until they reach Mictecacihuatl's throne room, where she welcomes them back with that eternal skull smile, asking about their visit, tending their bones with infinite care, promising them that next year, when the marigolds bloom again, when the 9th month arrives, when the living light their candles and call their names, The gates will open once more. And so the cycle continues, year after year, generation after generation. The dead descend. The living remember. The marigolds bloom and fade and bloom again. Mictecacihuatl waits in her palace of bones, patient as the earth itself, knowing that everyone eventually joins her collection. But until then, there's Mictlantecuhtli. There's the festival where death loses its sting, where loss transforms into temporary separation, where the boundary between worlds becomes thin enough to reach across. The Aztec Empire fell. Tenochtitlan was destroyed and rebuilt as Mexico City. The temples crumbled. The priests were killed or converted. But the festival of the dead survived, transmuted, carried forward by people who understood something essential. We don't stop loving someone because they die. We don't stop needing them, missing them, wanting one more conversation, one more embrace, one more shared meal. And once a year, when the marigolds bloom and the candles are lit, when families gather and tell stories and dance in the darkness, once a year, impossibly, beautifully, we get exactly that. The dead come home. The living welcome them. And for one night, death is just distance, not ending. Rest now. Let the candles gutter out. Let the marigolds fade. Let the boundaries close until next year when the cycle begins again. The dead are safely back in Mictlan, tended by the Lady of Bones. And you, alive, awake, exhausted from your night-long vigil, you fulfilled the ancient obligation. You remembered. You honored. You proved that love is stronger than the 9 levels of hell, more persistent than oblivion, more powerful than death itself. Sleep well. The festival is over, but it will return. It always returns. When the marigolds bloom, sweet dreams.